Well, another sign that spring has arrived on Delmarva, the annual Oxford Day celebration. It's actually coming up on Saturday in Talbot County. One highlight of that small town affair is free rides out on the Treadavon River aboard the famed Oxford Bellevue Ferry.
And of course, Jim Duffy, author of Secrets of the Eastern Shore, has done, just a little bit of digging into the history of the ferry, all 340 years of it. And he joins us this afternoon to boil all that history down to 3 things to remember the next time you are on that ferry. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Good to
How
see
about
you.
yourselves?
Great, yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so 340 years old.
Yes.
Do the math.
1680s. Just really a few decades after Jamestown, so super early in the colonial period. The first thing to remember the next time you get on that ferry is scandal.
Ooh, scandal.
Scandal. That's always good. The first guy who was hired to run the ferry after the equivalent of the city council back then approved a ferry crossing on the river was named Richard Royston. He was a bigwig in town when they handed out building lots and they were forming the town. He got lot number 1. He was a merchant. He had a lot of business back and forth London, running ships and things like that. This is so early that there's no money. They paid him 2,500 pounds of tobacco a year in order to run the ferry.
Really?
He only lasted a year or two. One of his deals went south. It's all a little bit vague, but he ended up being accused of forgery, convicted of forgery, sentenced to be whipped in public. Not sure whether that actually happened or they let him off. And he left town with his tail between his legs. Ooh. Fast forward 10 years. He dies at sea. Now, was it a heart attack, a shipwreck? There's no record. He dies at sea. You know how everybody thinks like our politics are unusually bitter these days? They don't hold a candle to the colonial legislature.
Really?
Because what the colonial legislature did upon learning that this guy had died was they passed a formal resolution, and that resolution said, we really hated this guy.
Oh my
he was a terrible person. He was full of ignorance. The phrase they used, notoriously scandalous. And we just wanted to say that after getting the news that he died.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we have scandal and bitterness.
Wow.
That's number 1,
That's
right?
number 1,
Okay,
scandal
so
and bitterness.
what's
Number 2,
number 2?
Strength.
Strength, okay.
All right? So you got this wooden barge-like ferry in the colonial times, put a cart on there, pack a bunch of tobacco on that cart, maybe a couple thousand-pound of oxen, maybe a couple of workers. You put them on there. The only way to move the thing was with a 14-foot-long sweep oar in the back. One person operation. Now, it's only a mile across. It's a mile across.
It's a mile.
And then you get to the other side, and there's more oxen, and there's more, and then you got to come over. So this lasted for like 200 years. There was another time when they had a 2-oar system and 2-people system. But it took supposedly like superhuman strength to get this thing across. And then the steam engines came along and made things a little bit easier, but they were messy and they were stinky, and they bought a cheap old boat that used to sink every night, and they used to have to pull it out of the water and clear out the crabs and everything like that. So it didn't get that much better. But strength, that's number 2.
All right, so what's number 3?
Number 3 is gender. So if you get on the ferry today it's run by a husband and wife couple, the Bixlers. Okay. And if you get on there today, you might think, hey, this is great, our 21st century, woman in charge of the ferry and everything like that. She's not the first one. The first one was in the 1600s, a woman by the name of Amy Jensen. We don't know very much about her. In the early 1700s, Judith Bennett ran the ferry. And her story is interesting because she was married to a guy who ran the ferry. He died, she ran the ferry. She married again, he ran the ferry, he died, she ran the ferry. So the historical record says she ran the ferry when she was between husbands.
Oh.
and there were two other women in the 1730s and the 1750s who ran the ferry. So when you have that thought about, isn't it great our 21st century when a woman can be a ferry captain? It's like, well, history's kind of full of surprises, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I will remember those.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible.
Jim Duffy, Secrets of the Eastern Shore, as always. Thank you. We'll see you next week.